We're going to call on Ben. You're there. Come up to the stage and tell us all about modern briefing. Thank you. A bit of round of applause for him.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the intro. I don't think I need that. Okay, so I'm terrified because I've worked with and for many of you, and I haven't seen you for a long time, so I'm scared. But thank you for having me. Thank you to the IPA as well for putting this on, and for Amelia and her team. It's really good to be back amongst so many kind of smart planners. There aren't tons of smart planners in America. I hope this hasn't been broadcast to America. But if anyone who wants a job, come over to New York. There's tons of demand for amazing people like lots of you guys. So I've got 10 minutes or 13 and a half minutes. I'm going to start with some caveats, which you're going to get used to in my little chat. So we in the Creative Lab are, I don't know, many of you I think have probably come across us. We're not particularly great at what I'm about to talk about, but we're just one strange corner of Google marketing. So there's a much greater organization that's, and a greater in both senses of the word, bigger and better than us at like working with agencies. So we have a stab at it, but we don't necessarily do a fantastic job. But I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go. But just so the context is we're a tiny bit of the Google marketing organization, which is full of professionals. We don't actually do tons of work with creative agencies anymore. So we used to do a bit more than we do now in the kind of earlier days of Google marketing, kind of being set up and staffing up and finding awesome people. And many of you may have touched various bits of that work. But we tend to do much more work now with kind of design agencies and production partners more directly than we do with creative agencies. But we still work with the odd unfortunate group of people. And unfortunately, when we do work with creative agencies, we don't tend to brief terribly well. So I'm going to tell you a bit about why we don't brief very well, and then explain how we manage to get any work made, given that we don't brief very well, given this is about briefing. But, this is important, we're really sorry, because we know we're bad, and I'll explain why we're bad. Okay, so, why do we brief badly, and how on earth do we get any work made that sometimes is occasionally good? So I'm going to focus on 4 things which will sound very familiar to lots of you who kind of work in modern companies which are probably afflicted by the same kinds of pressures that afflict Google. We're kind of very myopic. We think that we're the only ones that have these problems, but actually, of course, these problems are the problems that you probably face either in your agencies or in your companies that you work in now. So firstly, why we brief badly? Number one reason, we have a chaotic environment. So as you may have heard, there are quite a large number of quite clever people at Google. Many of them are in this room. Mark's one of them. Unfortunately, I'm not. And we work on many overlapping projects and products at the same time. So there's a kind of natural chaos to the way we work, which doesn't help us either work with agencies or brief agencies well or deeply or even properly in some senses. There's the Google culture, those of you who know Google, have worked with us or come across us, tends to be one where there's little hierarchy. There's a kind of decentralized model where decision-making is kind of like, given out to people who are sometimes like younger than your own children. And it can be really, really unsettling, but brilliantly exciting, the fact that things happen almost without you knowing. So that doesn't always help, to have a sense of kind of simplicity and consistency and pithy, kind of definition around briefs. And then finally, I think the chaos point, hello, Dan. It's a very scrappy culture. So we like to pride ourselves on the fact we're scrappy and we're a bit chaotic. And there's a bit of pride to this chaos, which, again, doesn't help either make us look professional or particularly help agencies or partners who are working with us to help make awesome stuff with us. Because what we find exciting, other people often find confusing. Moving on to number 2, second reason why I think we're not so good at briefing in the traditional sense, is that we have this kind of ridiculous constant, what I call constant sprint orientation. So everything happens at 100 miles an hour, which again, I'm very conscious that probably is what it feels like where you guys work as well. So it's not something that's kind of unique to Google or anything like that. But it's not just in a kind of, it's always a pitch, it's always pitch pace. You often hear that from people that work at Google. It's like being in a pitch the whole time. It's not just that. So I've spent a while thinking about this since I've been at Google and worked with Google for almost 7 years. And it's more fundamentally that time seems to take on a different shape in a company like Google, where there is no time. This literally doesn't happen. So things happen instantly, or they don't tend to happen at all, which is really unhelpful for partners who are craftspeople, right? They're craftsmen and women, and you guys need time to kind of do what you do well, and we often don't give you that kind of oxygen to kind of let those ideas bloom. And we, unfortunately, kind of, again, feed on that instant, quick turnaround, sprint, week stuff. And it's like, as I've kind of often described to people, it's like an invisible voice that tells you constantly to speed up, be quicker, do it now. And you get used to it, and it's thrilling, and it's exciting, but it's also kind of, I think, damaging often to, the way we work with partners. It's also exhausting. Then I think the third point is there's this kind of blur between product and marketing, where often we're working with partners and agencies on campaigns for products that aren't yet finished, or in some senses aren't yet even really kind of clear what they are. And that's a real bad scenario to kind of brief an agency partner, and I can see a few people nodding who've worked with me on this type of stuff. So often we have, in the Creative Lab, we have an opportunity to kind of influence the product in terms of its development, or sometimes influence the way the product is experienced by people in its very first iteration, its launch, some of the kind of bigger, the bigger kind of launch events and experiences. And that can also kind of blur the boundaries between communications and marketing and product, which again is like a horrible minefield of like who's in charge and who's the real boss. So product details are never definitive. They never tend to stick for very long. And I found the trick actually is to step back from the details of what the product is and what the features might be and how cool they are, and think about the broader picture of what does this product or feature represent in terms of benefit to users, and how is it going to make people's lives different or better, rather than concern yourself with whether it's like 7.2 seconds to boot up screen versus 8. So we always try and encourage agencies to step back and look at the bigger picture and what this represents. Agencies frequently struggle with this point around product and marketing because no one in the agencies tends to have, and again, I'm broad brush stroking here, so some of you will probably do this, but few agencies have someone whose job it is to kind of be the product person. So we will often have a struggle with, is it the planner? Is it the person they call the technologist who's got a kind of weird goatee beard and just doesn't say much but has 4 phones? Who is the person whose job it is to be like the person in the room who knows that the new Chrome release allows you to kind of talk into the screen and use voice? Who should be knowing that so that we don't have to be the people knowing that? But I'll come back to the agency's kind of issues with this in a second. And then finally, I don't know how to put this, but so I just put it in quote marks. Larry Page uses this phrase a lot, and unfortunately, I don't know where he got it from, but he uses it a lot, and it's kind of basically all the other things put together, which is you must be like incredibly better than anything else ever. So there's a lot of kind of speak at the moment. Any of you saw the Wired article, I think this week or last week, with interview with Larry about moonshot thinking and about the difference between 10 times better and 10% better. There's a kind of strong strand, any of you who've worked with Google know this and feel this, that things can be dramatically better and much different and hugely improved versus just incrementally better. And that kind of almost like mixes the top 3 ingredients into a kind of chaotic storm of confusion and just like bubbly excitement and lots of intelligent people doing things kind of out of control. So all these things mean that this, which is my key reveal for the day, which is we don't really have a briefing process. We don't tend to brief in a kind of conventional linear way, not because we don't think it's a great thing to do or that it's a really good discipline. That I was brought up as a planner. I kind of think this is incredibly important, but because we can't, because we're not built to do that, and we don't function that way, and we can't expect our partners to kind of expect beautifully crafted briefs from us. So this process doesn't work, and largely because we very often have little idea what we actually need, right? So which sounds ridiculous and possibly naive to say, but we're often moving at speeds which mean we can't even conceive of how we're going to talk about something, let alone put that down in a really elegant form, which is what we call a creative brief or a client brief or a product brief or a project brief. So we tend to kind of be at the point which is like maximum confusion with minimum time. So onto the kind of bits which I think maybe reflections on what we look for in planners particularly, but also, I guess, in agency partners more broadly from the Creator Lab point of view, and I think this is true of Google Marketing as well. We have this kind of typology, which I'm not sure, unfortunately this is public, so I wish it wasn't being recorded, but we shouldn't really say this, but we do look for what we call head chefs, right? So rather than waiters. So we don't like people coming up to us with a kind of notebook and saying, what can I do for you? We much prefer people saying, ta-da, I've cooked this for you and it's wonderful and it's going to taste great and you don't know the ingredients, but trust us. And this is really, really important to us. This is what we look for more than anything else, which is leadership, getting ahead of the game, vision, confidence, also confidence actually to push back sometimes and say, no, you don't want what you've just asked us, you want this. So we work best with partners who see themselves as taking the lead, not taking down an order from us. And this is really, really important. I think it leads to the others as well. We work best with planners, and again, generally with agencies who lean into our products more than us, right? And that sounds kind of silly, but why would an agency or a partner or a planner in an agency want to know the product better than the client? It's because it's possible to do so, right? So things evolve very, very quickly. We have this very myopic view. We're in this kind of strange bubble, this kind of Google world. You guys will have a much greater grasp of how real people use technology X, Y, or Z, and that's your Jedi skill, right? To be the voice and the behavior of the user, the real user, versus the kind of the engineer or the Google marketing person. And so, this is a constant battle because there's a real misperception, I think, amongst agencies and partners who work with us that we have a huge stash of secret products that we're developing that if only the agencies knew what they were, they could develop great campaigns and do something really cool. Actually, that's not true, certainly in marketing, we have very little access, more than you guys would have, to like the real stuff. Google's a very open company. We can launch stuff and share it and iterate it in the public, which is sometimes not the best thing to do. But the truth is that just by using what's already out there, you can be like 10 steps ahead of the game. So let me give you an example. So Chrome is a browser. You guys hopefully all use Chrome. It's one of the better ones. Version 25 is out in a couple of weeks. And that's like, they release a new version every 6 weeks. And that's the kind of one that your mum and dad should use, right? You guys should be using Canary, which is the yellow one, which is the developer version, where it's like slightly unstable, might crash a few times, but will give you like really cool things which the main one doesn't have. And if you're really geeky, you can use the blue one, which is called Chromium, which is again publicly accessible. You can download that today. That's the one that the developers try out really crazy stuff on, which is like might be launched, might not be launched, might be kind of sunsetted before it's even launched. So that's basically, if you look at the browser as your canvas for like modern creativity on the web, that gives you guys as much access to the products as we have. We don't have any more access than those 3 versions of that browser. Just an example. The next thing you can do, I'm looking for my warning sign, is you can understand, to link to the first point, the last point, you can understand our users more fully than we do. So, we are clearly an engineering-led versus a marketing-led culture. And that's different to maybe some of the other clients or companies you guys work with who are much, much more professional about marketing and have historically been really strong marketers and have marketing groups and basically are kind of consumer-led. We're kind of engineering-led. We like to say that we're user-led. We're not as good at that as maybe many of you in this room are in terms of kind of like really bringing the insights about people and about real people's lives. So, I think we have tons of really talented people in research and in UX and so on. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. But compared to what you guys are used to doing for the clients that you guys work on, we're bumbling amateurs in marketing. Certainly in the Creator Lab, we're definitely bumbling amateurs in terms of bringing real understandings of how real people use technology and what their behavior is like. And again, you can have planners particularly can have this Jedi power in terms of like talking with Google and Google marketing teams, Google product teams, in terms of just saying, no, wait. Real people do this. Actually, I've spotted this, I've observed this, or I've read this, and everyone will stop clattering around their keyboards, which people do in Google meetings, and they'll listen to you because you are saying something which is really useful. And you say understanding users and how they interact with products and what they need from us and how to message them is incredibly important. And something that planners, I think, particularly can do really well. 2 more points, hopefully, that I can fit in 2 minutes. This is really important. So, linked to many of the previous points, of course, but and of course there are exceptions to this rule. Primarily when we say to agencies, just do what we say now. So there are exceptions when we panic. But the most valuable relationships we have with agencies and with planners, particularly within those agencies, is when those people are bringing us things that we haven't asked for. And not in a kind of like speculative, like, just bring us ideas, but much more in a, we spotted an opportunity where, Windows 8's launching in 2 months. It's going to be challenging for users to get used to the interface, which is going to be based on squares and touch, and it's a completely different paradigm in terms of how you interact with an interface on a computer. We think now would be a great time to go out with a campaign that's about the simplicity of what you know and the consistency of Chrome across devices, enabling you to kind of access blah blah blah, whatever it might be. That's like, wow, we hadn't thought of that because we're too busy worrying about the next release of Chrome or voice APIs or whatever it might be. And just by being canny observers and students of what's happening out there, you can add massive value and just bring that to the table, and we will usually kind of go, oh, thank God someone's thought of something smart we can do. And then finally, in terms of what planners can do, again, I'm skirting around the issue that we don't have proper briefing process, so I'm just making lots of points up. But the best people we work with, and the people we frankly would love to hire if we could, are the people who seem to have a mad interest in what we do and why. And I think the why is really important too. So it's not just like that we make things for the web or we make things for the internet, but what is Google trying to do when it launches product X? What is YouTube really about? It's not really about entertainment. It's about something bigger. What's Chrome's mission? And the people who kind of get that, and again, it totally talks to a planning type brain who kind of who can have and accommodate these giant things in their heads, which I failed to do. But we love people who can kind of help us, will remind us why we're doing things. Well, we get caught in the weeds. I'm going to give you a finger back. We get caught in the weeds, and we need that kind of reminder to kind of re-elevate our thinking back up to kind of why we're doing this. And the planners are really, really great at doing that, and and we encourage people to do that. So it's not about this isn't about like seniority or experience or 15 years in the business or titles or the most senior person in the room. This could be anyone. This can be like the intern. This can be the junior planner who's just like a massive geek who comes in and is like, oh, I've just noticed that you've just launched this new thing on WebSockets and enables you to do this. So basically this is what makes us fall in love with planners, this kind of passion. So that's what we look for. I think my next slide is just blank. Yeah.
Ben Malbon, everybody, thank you so much.